I'm Jake, and in this video series, we're going to make a simple website where you can log in and store data in a database and also make it so that it is available publicly so people could create accounts and stuff. Now, this video specifically is going to be going over HTML and CSS so we can kind of make a simple little page just to start out with, and we'll kind of build over it as we go through the series. So I'm not really going to go too deep into HTML and CSS as part of this series. But if you are interested in that and you want me to kind of actually go deeper and explain more of HTML and CSS or maybe some libraries, drop a comment down below and maybe that's something I can make for you guys in the future. Well, let's just get started. All right, so we have our HTML page, and if you wanted to follow along, which you absolutely can do, you're going to want to create an HTML page. So index.html is fine. And then a style.css page or style.css file. They're two files, and just make sure that they're in the same folder. Then, in order to actually see your HTML page, you can just, if you're using Visual Studio or probably most other IDEs, you can just go ahead and right-click that whatever your HTML file is, and go ahead and click copy path. And then if you open up your browser, you can then just go to that path. So by pasting it in, and it will open up your page. Right now, there's nothing actually here because our file is empty. So let's start adding some stuff. So one thing that you typically want to add, although to be honest, I've not really found that it's required all the time, is specifying the doc type. So you do this by doing a less than, and then doc type and HTML. Kind of auto completes it for me. Nice. By the way, if you do want to follow along, but you can't really type or anything right now, maybe you're on your phone, all of the code for this entire series will be on my GitHub, and it will also be in the description down below. So you can follow along at your leisure. All right, so we have our doc type HTML, and if we go back and refresh this, nothing happened because we're just specifying that this HTML type is of doc type HTML, which to be honest, again, kind of feel like it's not really needed in this day and age, but it's just a good practice to maintain. Next thing we're going to do is add a head. So the head is the part of the document that you don't actually see. So everything else within the document, typically everything else within the body of the document, will actually have content that you see and interact with on the page. So to start out, we're going to create our head, and you can see when you create HTML, you have one tag. This is considered a tag, and it has a less than, a name, and then a greater than. And this specifies the start of the tag or the area. And then the same thing, but with a / here, this specifies the end of it. So anything you put between this and this is in the head. So one thing we can do here is we can specify a title. So we can make a title, and just like the head, it's just the same format. It's just called title. And let's just call this awesome website. Perfect. Now, if we go ahead and save that and we go back to our page here and we refresh, you can now see that at the top, it says awesome website. So this specific title thing actually specifies what the tab title is of the page. So there you go. So far, so good. The next thing we're going to do is link to our style sheet. If we go to our style sheet, it is a style.css file. Nothing is in it quite yet, but we'll add some stuff to it by the end of this video. So the next thing we're going to do is do link. So again, less than, but we're actually going to have some stuff within the start of this. And this is actually an auto closing tag because all of these are tags. So we're going to say rel equals style sheet. Then we're going to say text equals text CSS to specify that we were loading a CSS style sheet. And then we're going to type href equals, and then we're going to do style.css. And then in order to do a self-closing, we basically do a / and a greater than. And that means that this line doesn't have an end tag. It's just basically saying that everything that we want to define for this tag can actually be defined within the tag itself. Typically, things that are put within or between tags are things that are actually visible. or may change the website in some way. What this is basically doing is saying that we're going to rely on this other style .css file, and we're going to load it into our page so that we can use it. And CSS is actually the way that you can style your HTML. So HTML, the building blocks to build your website, and then CSS allows you to make that website look pretty. Pretty. Yay. All right. So if we refresh and go and look at our website now, nothing will change because we added the style CSS because, again, it is empty. So let's add some content. So we're going to do body. And now we have an empty body. And again, if we save and refresh, nothing has changed because we haven't added anything yet to the body. The body is basically like the container for the content of the page. All right, so we're going to add a few things first. So the first thing we're going to do is an H1. An H1 tag is similar to like a title where it doesn't self-close, not like the link. And this stands for header 1, which means a really big header. So let's say awesome website. Oh, website. Now, if we save this and go back to our site and we refresh, we can now see it says awesome website. And it's a big text. We can also do H2 and say about me. And if we go back and refresh, you can see that it's saying more text, but it's slightly smaller. So that's because an H2 is smaller than an H1. I think it goes to H6. So I don't actually remember. Yeah, H6. H6 is much smaller. Test. And to the point where it's very small. Weird for a header to be that small. So we're not going to add that in, but just so you know, that's kind of what exists. And if you're using a smart IDE, like a more futuristic IDE, honestly, probably any IDE at this point, and you have an HTML file, you're probably going to get a lot of this autocomplete stuff already set up. But if you don't, try Visual Studio Code, because that's what I use, and I like it a lot. But hey, use whatever you like. I don't really care. That's just what I use. I have actually a video, if you want to check it out, right up here. You can check out why I like Visual Studio Code, because, again, pretty sweet. Not sponsored, because I doubt Microsoft would sponsor me. All right. All right, so next thing we're going to add is a paragraph. So this is a paragraph about my awesome website. Now, if we go back here and refresh, you can see it's just some normal text. You can notice that headers are bolded typically, whereas the paragraph is just, again, normal text, not bolded, not italicized, nothing like that. So a paragraph is just a P. There's no other version of it. It's just P. That's it. Next thing we're going to do is add an anchor. Again, we don't need all of this stuff. I'm just kind of showing you some of the things that we can add to our website because we're going to use a lot of these throughout this course. So an anchor starts with A, and it's similar to a link where we have content within the part of the tag, the first part, but there is an end tag because we need to specify what do we want to be an anchor. And again, an anchor is like a link. So we need to specify what do we want it to link to. So we can say like https www.google.com. And we can say, go Google it. And then if we go back and refresh our page, we can see go Google it. And if we open it in a new tab, it links to google.com. Pretty awesome. All right, so I just went ahead and also added a profile.jpg. This is like my profile picture on YouTube and among a number of other social medias. But I actually ran it through Stable Diffusion to make me look like a character from Arcane. I don't know how well it worked, but if you want to learn about Stable Diffusion, drop a comment down below, and it's kind of fun. All right, anyways, we can add an image now to our website, now that I have an image. So we can do img, and just like an anchor, we need to specify what we want to show. But instead of an href, because we're not linking to a site, we specify source. And we would just do profile.jpg, and it's a self-closing thing because we don't actually have anything really we're showing here. It's just going to load the image. One thing that is actually good to do, though, is to specify an alt, and this is a picture of Jake. Alt is actually something that allows screen readers and things like that to be able to describe a picture to people who are using screen readers. So always nice to be mindful of that. So if we go back and refresh our page here, we can see we have this giant image. Awesome. Cool. So the next and final thing we're going to add here is we're going to add a UL, which stands for unordered list. And within here, we're going to add some list items. So all we're going to do is just do li item 1, and then we can just copy that to make it item 2. So when we go back and refresh here, we can see we get item 1 and item 2 down here at the bottom. Pretty awesome. Now, you might say, like, who cares? This stuff isn't particularly useful. And I think given what this website is looking like right now, yeah, you'd be right. But the goal here is not to make a website that looks like this. It's to kind of show you some of the building blocks so that we can make a website that is actually useful. So we're going to use basically all of this stuff in order to make a cool website that, again, you'll eventually be able to post online and have anybody go to it. So let's keep going. So this is really cool, but one thing that might be useful is rather than have everything on the side here, what if it was kind of centered a bit more? So there's actually many ways that you could do this. But one way that I really like is to create a div with a class called of a wrapper. And again, you can kind of name things whatever you'd like, but a div is a special type. Here it has no special meaning, and it's purely used to just kind of organize your file here. So if we go ahead and do this, and we create a div, and then we go ahead and give it a class of wrapper. Now, if we go back and refresh this page, it's going to look the exact same. But what the class actually does is it is referencing some CSS. And the CSS, again, allows us to make our website more pretty. So let's go ahead and go to our style.css file and create a wrapper class. In order to do that, you do dot and then wrapper. So whatever you named it, if you wanted to name it something else, you can do that. Or wrapper without the W, that's fine too. So what we're going to do here is we're going to specify a width of 800 pixels. And then we're going to say margin auto. Now, when you are defining CSS, you're always going to have, or if for a class, you're always going to have dot wrapper or dot whatever the class name is. I'm going to say always with an asterisk because there's always some edge case where maybe you don't want to do that. But for a simple class, this is what it's probably going to look like. So dot means class. If you do a hashtag or a pound sign, that means you're referencing an ID, which we can get to later on. And then here you're specifying wrapper, which is again the name, and then these little squiggle braces. And then here we're specifying the width. So width of whatever the element is that we're referencing, and then colon, and then 800 pixels is we want it to be 800 wide. And then we have a semicolon to specify that that is the end of this part of the CSS. And then the next part is margin auto. And margin auto means that it's going to basically center it. So it's going to make it 800 pixels, and then it's going to try and make the margins equal on all sides. So if we just go ahead and go back to our page and refresh, ta-da, things are centered. And you know, if we change the size of this, it would always remain centered. All right, so it's looking great so far, but what if we wanted to add a navigation bar? So if you go to most websites, there's probably something at the top that's like 80 pixels tall or something like that. And it allows you to like go home, to log in or whatever. So let's add something like that. So just to make this a little bit faster, I'm going to paste some code in and then we're going to talk about it. All right, so I've gone ahead and pasted in this code here. So here we have a nav, which is kind of like a div. It's just specifying that it's going to be a section of the page, and it's probably going to have navigation links, so like a nav bar. I gave it a class of nav bar. We're also using the wrapper class here. And then within here, I have a nav left, which is specifying the left side, which will have a home icon or a home button. And it has a nav item as a class. And this is an anchor. So this means that we can click this to route to some specific location. In this case, the home. This slash just means like the root of your website, meaning like facebook.com or instagram.com or whatever. Like nothing is after the com, basically. Then we have another div here that has nav right, and within it we have two anchors. They both have the class item, and this href means when you click about, nothing really happens. This one, when you click register, it will go to whatever your website is /register. So let's go ahead and load this, and there you go. Looks amazing, doesn't it? No, because again, HTML is the building blocks, but now we need to make it pretty using CSS. So again, just as before, I'm going to paste in some CSS, and then we're going to go over what it's doing. All right, so I've just pasted in all this code, and I know it's going to look like a lot, but trust me, it's going to be great. So this is what it actually is going to look like. And you'll notice there's this weird white bar around it. We can actually get rid of that by just saying body, and then margin 0 and padding 0. And if we go ahead and save that and refresh, there we go, the white bar is gone. So how do we actually do this? So you can even see we have these pretty sweet hover effects for all of our things, and things are spread out. There's clearly things that are on the right and clearly things that are on the left. So let's get into the CSS of how this actually works. So we're going to move this CSS file over here. I don't know where I'm going to be. Maybe I'm going to be down here on the bottom left. I feel like that might make sense. First off, we have the nav bar. The nav bar, we're simply setting the background color to this 333, which is a color that just looks like this down here. Now the reason we're doing this here is because we want the entire nav bar itself to actually have that color. We don't only want the part in the middle to have that color. We want the entire thing to be this 333 color, this dark kind of blackish gray thing. Then we're setting this padding. Now, if we get rid of this padding and we go back and refresh this, you can see it still works. It's just very small. So we're going to want padding so that we can actually just kind of make things to be a little bit more spread out. Finally, we're setting color to white, and setting the color specifies what color is the text going to be within this thing here. So that's what that's doing. It's setting the color to white. You might actually notice that we're doing this again down here. So if we remove this and refresh, it actually works just the same. So there we go. I've already found some optimizations. Okay, next thing is you might notice that we're actually already using the wrapper, because the wrapper is allowing us to specify the width of 800 pixels and the margin of auto. But because the wrapper is also under the nav bar, it's a child, this is going to take effect. So that's what this means, that if the wrapper is a child of the nav bar, which it is because it's directly under it, then we're going to go ahead and apply this. So here we're displaying flex. Flex is kind of the, I guess it's not the new hotness. It was the new hotness for a while ago when I was really working on web a lot, but it's a way to be able to distribute the children of the div or whatever has the class in some type of way. So in this case, we have justify content space between. So let's go ahead and remove this and see what happens, which is, again, is kind of a great way of coding with this, because if we do that, there you go. There's no longer space between. So there's no space between the children. And if you look here, we actually have two children, right? The left and the right. So if we say that we want space between them, as much space as possible, then that makes sense that this is now going to be spread out. Now we have align items center. And to be honest, I don't actually think that this is going to be required, just due to how everything else is set up. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. I think we can safely get rid of that. If we go back and refresh, we can see it's actually just the same. As you can see, you continue to learn as you continue to write stuff. So here we have the nav item. So the nav item is actually the inner part, but it's really simple. So we'll just go over it really quickly. So we're setting the color to be white, text decoration to be none. This means that for anchors, which all of these are, so like links, just like this, go Google it, there's no underlining and it's just white. That also means that if you click it, it doesn't turn purple. Next, we're setting some padding for them. And then we're also setting this transition of a background color to 0.3 seconds. This means that the background color will change color in 0.3 seconds if there is a change in background color. And you can see that that's going to happen later for the hover state. So next is the nav left and nav item. So for the nav left, if it's a nav item, we want it to have margin auto, because we want it to be able to be spread out. Nav right, nav item, is going to have a margin left of 10 pixels. This is just to ensure that some things are spread out. So in case we had a lot of things within our nav, we can still have some things spread out. Next, we have nav item hover, which means that if we hover over the nav item, just like back up here, the background color is going to change to this other, this 555 color. And then we're also going to have a border radius. But if you remember from before, with this transition of background color, it's going to change over 0.3 seconds. I think I said 3 seconds before, so 0.3 seconds. And finally, for the flexbox layout for left and right sections, the nav left and the nav right, we're basically just saying display those, flex, and align the items to center. If we get rid of align item center, we can go ahead and see that nothing happens again. And if we go back and refresh, everything is great. If we hover, you can see that it changes pretty quickly, and it actually has the border radius kind of happening later. I personally don't like that, so what I would do would just be move this and put this here. So the nav item by default has a border radius. And if we go ahead and refresh, you can see that it kind of just shows up automatically. It doesn't kind of go from a rectangle to something else, because we don't want that to happen. If you wanted that to happen though, and that to have a more smooth transition, you could just have another transition part here to specify that you also wanted that to happen for the border radius. But I don't. I want it to happen immediately or already be there. So that's it. This is our starter website. If you click any of these links, things are going to break because, well, this is now going to my C drive. And if I go here, it's going to go to register, which is not a thing. Because again, I'm just viewing this as a simple index.html file. I'm not actually hosting this. I'm not running this in a server, right? I can do this. There's nothing that's really making this file visible. It's just I'm telling my computer, specifically Chrome, to just like load this file. That's all I'm doing. It's like opening a file in another, like opening a document or something like that. It doesn't really do anything fancy. PDF. So actually in the next video, we're going to actually host our website through a Flask Python server. And that will mean that the home, the about, and the register pages will all work as expected. It will actually go to different pages. And that would also mean that in theory, people inside of your home network could also access your website. It wouldn't mean that necessarily people outside of your network could, but we'll get to there eventually. And if you want to come along on this journey of making a website, consider subscribing and maybe ring the bell, click the bell, whatever you do with the bell, so you can be notified for the next video that comes out. It should be in a week. So if it's not, my bad. But I'm also going on vacation soon, so hopefully it's still every week. So that's all for this video. Thank you so much. Give it a like if you liked it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.